Tires matter. They're the only part of your vehicle that touches the road. Tread confidently with new tires from Tire Rack. Whether you're looking for expert recommendations or know exactly what you want, Tire Rack makes it easy. Fast, free shipping, free road hazard protection, and convenient installation options. Go to TireRack.com to see tire test results, tire ratings, and consumer reviews, and be sure to check out all the special offers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.
Looking for a home that keeps you connected to Silicon Valley without the usual barriers to entry? The Gates in Morgan Hill by City Ventures is a walkable neighborhood near downtown restaurants, outdoor trails, and an easy commute to the Bay Area. It's a small town setting with access to major career hubs. Every home is all electric with buyer-owned solar included. With limited availability, now's the time to take a closer look. Discover your new home at cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
To enjoy this episode ad-free, please visit patreon.com/forensictales.
Forensic Tales discusses topics that some listeners may find disturbing. The contents of this episode may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
It was a Tuesday morning in November 2001 when a customer arrived for her appointment at a small hair salon in Florence, Montana. But as she pulled into the parking lot, she noticed a strangely dressed man walking out of the building. Moments later, she walked through the salon's back entrance and discovered the body of a woman lying face down on the floor. Before long, 2 more victims would be found inside. 3 women had been murdered in broad daylight, leaving behind a crime scene that would challenge even the most skilled forensic investigators for decades. This is Forensic Tales, episode 345, The Florence Salon Murders. Welcome to Forensic Tales. I'm your host, Courtney Fretwell. Forensic Tales is a weekly true crime podcast with a forensic twist. Each episode features real stories highlighting how forensic science was used to uncover the truth. If you enjoy deep dives into real cases and the science behind them, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And if you want even more content, including monthly full-length bonus episodes and early ad-free access to over 300 episodes, you can join our community over on Patreon. The support there truly helps keep the show going. To learn more, visit patreon.com/forensictales. And one small favor that makes a huge difference for the show. If you're enjoying Forensic Tales, please consider leaving a positive review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps other listeners discover the podcast. Florence, Montana is probably the last place to come to mind when talking about a triple unsolved murder involving 3 innocent female victims. Cases like that are usually associated with much larger cities. Not a small, close-knit community where violent crime is rare. I think that's one of the reasons this case has always stuck with me. People don't associate Florence with brutal unsolved murders because it's so small. As of 2024, only about 1,000 people live there, and it's the kind of place that gives true meaning to the phrase, everyone knows everyone. You just can't go into a store or restaurant in Florence without seeing someone you know. And if you're from out of town, you'll stick out like a sore thumb. Outside of this western part of Montana, most people probably don't even know Florence exists. To find it on a map, you would have to drive about 20 miles south of Missoula. It's also not far from the Idaho state border. If you had a free afternoon, you could take a road trip and be there in about 5 hours. When I mentioned a moment ago about this not being a place you think of when talking about unsolved murders, This is what I mean. As far as crime rates are concerned, only about 10% of cities and towns across the country are safer than Florence. So if you're not the kind of person to lock your doors at night, this might be the place for you. Running through the heart of Florence is Highway 93, the town's main roadway and the path most people use to travel through the Bitterroot Valley. It's lined with a handful of local businesses, including restaurants, gas stations, and small shops that serve both residents and travelers passing through. And one of those businesses is the Hair Gallery. It's the kind of place you go to for a haircut, manicure, pedicure, or to just sit in a chair and talk to its owner, 62-year-old Dorothy Harris. And with business hours open 5 days a week, you can either make an appointment beforehand or just stop in. But this isn't your Fantastic Sam's or Supercuts. The Hair Gallery is a mom-and-pop business where clients are treated like family, which is why so many people keep going back for their haircuts. Before Dorothy Harris purchased the building and turned it into her salon, it was the town's post office building. And one unique feature of the building is that it was completely covered in windows, giving anyone driving down Highway 93 a chance to see inside. With a single glance at the Hair Gallery, you could see who was working, get to know their routines, see who their regular clients were. Everything was as easy as looking straight into an open window. And on the morning of November 6th, 2001, whatever sense of safety that openness once provided disappeared in an instant. By the end of the morning, 3 women would be dead inside the salon. It was just before 11 o'clock that morning when a customer pulled into the parking lot at the Hair Gallery for her regular nail appointment. And because this woman is a frequent customer at the salon, she knows to enter through the back door to get to her appointment on time. But as she parked her car in the nearly empty parking lot, she noticed a strangely dressed man walking out the front door. He was wearing a black duster coat and what looked like either a top hat or a large fedora. Not your typical outfit choice for this part of Montana. 2 things about the situation immediately stood out as strange. Number 1, why was this guy walking out of a hair and nail salon dressed like he just time traveled out of the 1920s? And number 2, customers knew to only use the back door, not the front. The whole situation was strange, but not strange enough for her to do anything about it. So after parking her car, she walked inside the salon through the back door, and that's when she saw the salon's owner, Dorothy Harris. She was curled up in the fetal position, lying in a pool of her own blood. Her routine salon appointment was now a small-town American triple homicide. To get to the phone to call for the police, the customer had to step over Dorothy's body, completely unaware that there were 2 more bodies inside the salon. They wouldn't be found until investigators showed up minutes later. Inside the small back utility room were the bodies of 44-year-old Brenda Patch and 71-year-old Cynthia Paulus. Brenda worked as a manicurist at the salon, and Cynthia was just a regular customer there. In just a matter of minutes, 3 innocent women had lost their lives inside a place where people came to relax and catch up with friends. Described as a loving wife, mother, grandmother, and someone who loved creating things with her hands, 62-year-old Dorothy Harris was the heart of the Hair Gallery. Originally from Harlowton, Montana, Dorothy married her husband Ed in 1955. Over the years, the couple owned several small businesses throughout western Montana, but hairdressing was always Dorothy's passion. In 1990, after years of running salons and other family businesses, she purchased the former Florence post office and transformed it into the Hair Gallery. For the community, it was more than just a salon. It was a place where girlfriends gathered, caught up on life, and left feeling a little better than when they walked in. Dorothy opened the salon to help people feel good about themselves, not knowing it would one day become the scene of a terrible crime. 44-year-old Brenda Patch worked as the salon's manicurist and was found alongside Cynthia in the back utility room. She had spent the previous 7 years working there and really got to know the clients personally. Outside of the salon, Brenda loved animals, gardening, ceramics, and spending quiet evenings watching the sunrise and sunset from her deck. She left behind her husband, 2 children, and grandson, and was just 5 days away from celebrating her 24th wedding anniversary. The third victim was 71-year-old Cynthia Paulus, a longtime customer at the hair gallery. Known to family and friends as Cindy, she was a devoted grandmother, an avid horseback rider, and a passionate University of Montana Lady Grizz basketball fan. She typically visited the salon on Friday mornings, but that week she moved her appointment so she'd look nice for a basketball game later that evening, a game she would never attend. Unlike Dorothy and Brenda, Cynthia wasn't an employee. She simply found herself in the wrong place at the wrong time. 3 women, 3 very different lives. Yet on the morning of November 6th, 2001, all 3 would become victims of the same brutal killer. But before investigators could determine who committed these murders, they first had to understand exactly what happened inside the salon. The only people who know the answer to that are the killer and the 3 victims. But the crime scene told a story of its own.
Tires matter. They're the only part of your vehicle that touches the road. Tread confidently with new tires from Tire Rack. Whether you're looking for expert recommendations or know exactly what you want, Tire Rack makes it easy. Fast, free shipping, free road hazard protection, and convenient installation options. Go to TireRack.com to see tire test results, tire ratings, and consumer reviews, and be sure to check out all the special offers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.
When it comes to injuries, the police have always been tight-lipped about them. Most of my source material says they were killed with some type of sharp instrument, and the women had their throats slit. The police would also say later on that they had suffered other injuries, but never publicly went into detail about what they meant. Even without knowing every little detail, you can just imagine the amount of blood involved in an attack like this. Investigators later described the hair gallery as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had ever worked, a scene they said they would never forget. Something also unique about the crime scene was where the women were discovered. Dorothy was found on the floor near the main entrance, but Brenda and Cynthia were in the back utility room. So given the salon's large windows overlooking Highway 93, it's possible the killer moved the 2 women to the back of the building before attacking them. Had the murders taken place near the front of the salon, anyone driving by could have looked through those windows and witnessed them happening. And if that's what happened, it may also explain why Dorothy was found separately from the other 2 women. She may have encountered the killer as she entered the salon or immediately after Brenda and Cynthia had already been attacked. Investigators also believed there had been some type of struggle inside the utility room. And while they've kept a lot of those details a secret, they have said the scene indicated that at least some of the victims fought back before they were killed. Even more troubling was the sheer lack of motive at the scene. None of the women showed any signs of a sexual assault, and nothing of value or money from the salon had been stolen. The only items that appeared to be missing were a few worthless styling capes. So a robbery didn't seem to be the motive, and a deep dive into the business's financial records revealed nothing significant or worth a second look. Beyond that, investigators have remained remarkably guarded about what they found inside the salon. whether that's because those details are being held back to protect the integrity of the investigation or because they contain information only the killer would know has never been publicly explained. But none of that means they left empty-handed regarding forensic evidence. Like any homicide investigation, every inch of the hair gallery had to be documented and processed. Detectives knew that if the killer had made even one mistake, the crime scene might reveal it. The first significant piece of physical evidence was a pair of black sunglasses that investigators recovered from inside the salon. But exactly where they were found has never been made public. In fact, authorities have only acknowledged that the sunglasses existed and released a photograph of them. They haven't said who the sunglasses belonged to, whether they were left behind by the killer, or whether forensic testing uncovered any fingerprints, DNA, or other trace evidence. But the sunglasses weren't the only piece of evidence investigators hoped would identify the killer. They also recovered a palm print, something that had the potential to place someone inside the hair gallery. Just like the sunglasses, authorities have never revealed exactly where the palm print was found. They have said it did not belong to any of the victims, and if it has ever been matched to someone through law enforcement databases, that information has never been made public, leading most people to believe that no match has ever been made. But the evidence inside the salon was only part of the puzzle. Detectives also wanted to know what happened after the killer walked out the door. Within hours of the murders, the police brought in a bloodhound dog to try to track his scent. With no obvious suspect, detectives hoped the bloodhounds could do what the physical evidence inside the salon couldn't: show them where the killer went after leaving the hair gallery. And initially, they were successful. The dog found the man's scent on the grass in front of the salon, as well as in the alley on the side of the building. The dog then tracked the scent north to a nearby bar and restaurant called Wild River. From there, it seems like the killer had made his way through the back streets of Florence and then across a school parking lot before the scent was lost in a nearby pasture along One Horse Creek Road. But the police weren't done with the dogs just yet. Investigators brought the dogs back the following day, hoping to extend the scent trail. This time, the bloodhound tracked the scent to a house across the street. But after speaking with the homeowner, detectives quickly ruled him out, describing him as someone who was not physically capable of committing the murders. So all we know is that the killer walked out of the salon, went through some of the back streets, then completely disappeared off the grid. When it comes to DNA, things get a little murky. None of the publicly available information I used for this episode says whether investigators recovered any DNA, developed a profile, or ruled anyone in or out based on genetic evidence. Whether that's because no usable evidence existed or because investigators have intentionally kept that information from the public simply isn't known. Another major piece of evidence investigators never recovered was the murder weapon. Despite extensive searches, whatever sharp instrument was used to kill the three women has never been found. So despite all of that, the crime scene, the sunglasses, the palm print, and even the bloodhounds, investigators still had one big problem. They didn't know who had walked into the hair gallery that morning or why. To try to answer those questions, detectives started reconstructing the victims' final hours, hoping a timeline would point them toward a suspect. And this is where things get even more interesting. The murders happened on a Tuesday morning, and every Tuesday, like clockwork, the salon's owner, Dorothy Harris, would show up before opening time, get the money together, and then drive to the bank in the town of Stevensville, a place roughly 8 miles away. That routine may have played an important role in what happened next. Based on Dorothy's trip to the bank and the locations of the victims' bodies, investigators believe Brenda Patch and Cynthia Paulus were likely attacked first. The killer may have entered the salon while Dorothy was gone, forced the two women into the back utility room, and killed them there. Then, sometime after Dorothy returned from the bank, investigators believe she encountered the killer near the entrance of the salon where she was ultimately found. Only minutes later, another customer pulled into the parking lot for her scheduled 11 o'clock appointment. But before she even stepped inside, she noticed something unusual: a tall, slender man walking out of the salon's front door. That simple observation would become one of the biggest mysteries in the entire investigation. No one knows who that strangely dressed man was, or whether he witnessed the murders or committed them. According to the customer who discovered the bodies, the man was either in his 20s or 30s, about 6 feet tall, and had what she described as narrow facial features. That detail alone has led people to consider two possibilities. Number one, he might be a lot younger than he appears. And number two, many locals in Florence have wondered whether he was actually a woman disguised as a man. That could explain the outfit, the coat and big top hat. He was dressed as if he had just time-traveled out of the 1920s. He wore a black calf-length duster coat and an unusually large, wide-brimmed hat, possibly a top hat or large fedora. So maybe we're not looking for a man at all. We're looking for a tall female with narrow facial features. And during their investigation, the police discovered she might not have been the only one who saw him that morning. Others said they saw him walking away from the hair gallery not long after the killings. And almost every single one of them said he was walking with purpose, like he was trying to get the heck out of Dodge. Although this man was seen leaving the salon just moments after the authorities say the murders happened, he's only been labeled as a person of interest, not a suspect. And to this day, he hasn't been identified. By the end of 2001, life for Florence residents had completely changed. People were genuinely afraid that a killer was on the loose. Here's what then Sheriff Perry Johnson said about that. Who would have ever believed that in Florence, Montana? A daytime triple homicide with 3 unrelated people at a professional business. I don't think I could overstate that. The amount of fear in that community. You could just about touch it when you drove into town. People were scared. They also started doing something they had never done before, locking their doors. Here's what an 18-year-old Florence resident said about that. I came home and my parents had the door locked. I said, "How am I going to get in? We never lock our door." Then I heard they came in there and killed these 3 old ladies. Here's what his mom said in the same article. We haven't locked our house for 12 years. We're not in Los Angeles. This is Florence, Montana, for crying out loud. Then, about 10 months later, investigators' attention was drawn to another homicide hundreds of miles away. One that shared some striking similarities to what had happened inside the hair gallery. The case was out of Great Bend, Arkansas, another place you might not have heard of. And although it's about 1,300 miles away from Florence, Montana, both towns are actually a lot alike. On September 4th, 2002, a customer pulled into the parking lot of the Dolly Madison Bakery at 1004 Harrison Street. And just like the hair gallery back in Florence, this particular shop was a standalone building with a bank to the west, and across the intersection, there was an Applebee's restaurant and a McDonald's. Also nearby was a smoke shop. As this customer drove his car into the parking lot, he saw someone locking the front door, but it wasn't anyone he recognized, and he had been coming to the bakery for years. That alone already sounds eerily similar to what happened in Florence. When the customer approached the door, the man said the bakery was closed for the day, which was also odd because it wasn't the regular closing time. Much later on, this customer would describe him as a white male, around 6 feet 1 inch to 6 feet 2 inches tall, 175 pounds, with collar-length light brown to blonde hair and a slight beard. He was wearing a black t-shirt, blue jean shorts, and a baseball cap. And after he locked up the bakery, he just walked right down the sidewalk, keys in hand. Several hours later, a delivery person arrived at the bakery at around 8 o'clock and entered through the back door. But instead of making his delivery, he encountered something else: the dead bodies of 2 women. The first was 24-year-old Mandy Alexander, a mother of 2 young children. She had just gotten a job at the bakery as a clerk 3 days earlier. And the second was 79-year-old Mary Drake, a frequent customer who had gone in that day to pick up some bread for dinner. Mandy Alexander wasn't even scheduled to work that day. The woman who was supposed to work that shift had called off because of a family emergency. So Mandy graciously stepped in and picked up the shift. Another detail eerily similar to the Florence murders: Cynthia wasn't supposed to get nails done that day either. And very similar to the investigation in Florence, the police haven't made many details public. But Mandy and Mary had both been stabbed to death with what they described as a sharp instrument. And when it came to the motive, the police didn't really find one. Only a handful of cash had been taken from the bakery's register, but not all of it. And both of the victims' purses and wallets were still there, and there weren't any signs of a sexual assault. Plus, if this had been a robbery, the suspect picked the wrong business. A bakery isn't a place known to carry a lot of cash, especially when there's a bank, smoke shop, and McDonald's right next door. Then there was the timing of the murders. They happened sometime between 5:15 and 6 o'clock in the evening, arguably the busiest time of day in this part of town. But whoever the killer was just walked right into the bakery and killed 2 innocent women, just like in Florence. So the similarities between both cases were just too hard to ignore. Both crimes occurred in small towns. Both happened inside local businesses during normal business hours. Both involved female employees and customers. Both featured an unidentified man seen leaving the scene. And in both cases, investigators were left with no obvious motive and no immediate suspect. So naturally, detectives in both states began asking the same question: could the same killer be responsible? Despite years of speculation, however, investigators have never found any evidence directly linking the 2 cases. Whether the similarities are meaningful or simply a remarkable coincidence remains unknown. And as of today, the Dolly Madison Bakery murders remain unsolved. If you want a deep dive into that case, I did an entire episode about it 1.5 years ago. You can find it in the show's catalog. As fascinating as the Great Bend case is, it didn't answer the biggest question in Florence: who killed Dorothy, Brenda, and Cynthia? It would take investigators several more years before they believed they had an answer. Nearly 5 years after the murders in 2005, the police announced they had identified a suspect and criminal charges would be filed any minute. That suspect was Brian Walter Weber.
Tires matter. They're the only part of your vehicle that touches the road. Tread confidently with new tires from Tire Rack. Whether you're looking for expert recommendations or know exactly what you want, Tire Rack makes it easy. Fast, free shipping, free road hazard protection, and convenient installation options. Go to TireRack.com to see tire test results, tire ratings, and consumer reviews, and be sure to check out all the special offers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.
Every month you rent, you're paying someone else's mortgage, building their equity, following their rules. There's a better way. Home ownership means stable, predictable payments, and every one of them works for you, not your landlord. City Ventures is California's leading builder of smart, innovative new homes, and right now owning may be closer than you think. See the numbers for yourself at cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
On the Bureau of Prisons website, he was listed as prisoner number 08347-046. But at the time the Florence Salon murders were committed, he wasn't a federal prisoner. He was living in Idaho, roughly 375 miles away from Florence. But just because he wasn't living in Florence at the time didn't mean he didn't have a connection to it. Brian Weber had actually grown up in Florence, Montana. Beginning when he was just a kid, Brian found himself in trouble with the law. He had become a small-time drug dealer specializing in meth sales, which became the police's second clue that he might be involved. They had long suspected that drugs were somehow involved. Not only did Brian Weber find himself in trouble with the police, but he also turned violent. According to friends and family, he would do anything to score some meth, including turning to violence. And in early November 2001, he and his girlfriend traveled to Montana to complete a drug transaction, which put him in the area at the same time the murders took place, Tuesday, November 6th, 2001. The first time the police sat down and spoke with Brian was just a few weeks after the murders on Thanksgiving Day morning. He didn't bring a lawyer, he traveled back to Florence on his own, and he agreed to do it on Thanksgiving. He even provided a DNA sample and let them search his van, the same car he drove at the time of the murders. So initially, it seemed like he was being fully cooperative and had nothing to hide. Detectives asked if he had ever been to the hair gallery before, but he said no. The only time he had stepped foot in there was when he was a kid. But back then, it wasn't a salon. It was the post office. He was also asked whether there was a chance his DNA could be found there or whether he knew any of the victims, but he said no. And when he was asked whether he was the one to commit the murder, he adamantly shook his head no. Following that interview, the police and Brian Weber went their separate ways. The police never had any evidence to arrest him, and Brian eventually moved to California for a while. Then came back to Montana, where he started selling drugs again. Years later, he would say that he was high on meth at the time, and that was the only reason he agreed to the interview in search of his van. 2 years later, in 2003, he was arrested for aggravated battery and aggravated assault. He was accused of assaulting a man by the name of Keegan Strelnick during a drug deal, and bail was set at $100,000. But just 6 months later, he agreed to accept a deal from prosecutors. Instead of receiving any prison time, he could plead guilty to lesser charges and receive probation, so that's what he did. But in July 2004, he was arrested again for possession of dangerous drugs with intent to distribute. But these charges were just the tip of the iceberg. He would eventually be linked to 2 additional incidents involving much larger scale meth operations. 5 months later, he was sentenced to 24 years and 3 months in federal prison. To some people, that might sound like a lot of time. But keep in mind, this happened at a time when the country was coming down really hard on drug crimes. Around the same time he received his federal sentence, things were heating up in the Florence investigation again. An anonymous source began contacting local newspapers, claiming to know who the killer was. Here's a direct quote from one of these communications. "They've got the guy locked up, so there's no real hurry. They've got the time to make sure they've got it all right before they go ahead. After that, more and more people around Florence heard the name Brian Weber being thrown around in connection to the case. But at this point, these were all rumors. The police didn't have any concrete evidence. So that's when they enlisted the help of a jailhouse informant named Perry Willingham, who had been arrested in 2005 for cooking up his own drugs inside a hotel room. They put him in the same prison cell and even installed listening devices, hoping he would start talking about the Salon murders, but that never happened. Brian Weber didn't confess to anything, and the plan even backfired when he found out what was happening and requested to be switched cells. But he isn't the only name that has been added to the suspect list. Another person of interest was Lincoln Benavides, an Idaho man who knew Brian through drug trafficking. In 2008, federal prosecutors alleged that Lincoln was the leader of a methamphetamine distribution ring operating throughout Idaho and Montana, and according to a 15-page indictment, prosecutors believed the Florence Salon murders were connected to that drug operation. Their theory was that the three women had been killed over an unpaid drug debt. Investigators alleged that Lincoln ordered the killings while Brian carried them out. But there are so many problems with this theory. Neither Brian nor Lincoln resembled the oddly dressed man witnesses saw leaving the hair gallery that morning. And beyond the indictment itself, very little evidence was ever made public, explaining exactly how prosecutors connected the two men to the murders. So over the next couple of years, the case against them continued to unravel. Lincoln eventually accepted a plea agreement on federal drug charges, but the murder charges were dropped. Then, in 2010, prosecutors dismissed the remaining murder charges against Brian Weber, stating they could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was responsible for the killings. Part of the problem was the evidence. Many of the prosecution's witnesses were jailhouse informants or individuals involved in the drug trade, raising very big credibility concerns. Brian's defense also claimed he was out of state at the time of the murders. And what makes this part of the story even harder to tell, many of the court records remain sealed, leaving you and me in the dark when it comes to a lot of information. And that's exactly where this case still stands today. Even almost a quarter of a century later, no one has ever been convicted. Brian has never been convicted. Lincoln has never been convicted. No one is sitting in prison for walking into the hair gallery and murdering Dorothy, Cynthia, and Brenda. And no one has come forward with credible information about who that strangely dressed person was seen walking out of the salon just moments after the murders occurred. And just as puzzling is the forensic evidence in this case. No murder weapon has ever been recovered. We don't know who left those black sunglasses behind in the middle of the crime scene. And that palm print remains unidentified. But none of that means the Florence Salon murders are unsolvable. And it might just be forensic science that finally brings closure. Forensic testing is light years ahead of where it was back in 2001 when these murders were committed. We now have things like ancestry testing. Our fingerprint databases are much more sophisticated. We have better DNA testing. If investigators preserved enough biological evidence, modern forensic testing could one day provide the breakthrough that wasn't possible in 2001. Until then, however, one question remains. Who walked into the hair gallery that Tuesday morning? And why? If you'd like to learn more about the Dolly Madison Bakery murders, I covered that case in its own dedicated episode about a year ago. I'll be sure to link it in this episode's show notes. As fascinating as the Great Bend case is, it didn't answer the biggest question in Florence. To share your thoughts on the Florence Salon murders, be sure to follow us on social media at Forensic Tales. And if you want to listen to new episodes early and ad-free, consider signing up for our Patreon at patreon.com/forensictales. You can get early ad-free access to new episodes and monthly full-length bonus episodes for as little as $3 a month. Your support on Patreon directly helps to fund the show's production, research, and editing costs. And as an independent one-woman podcast, your support truly helps to keep this show going. Forensic Tales is a Rockefeller audio production. The show is written and produced by me, Courtney Fretwell. If you'd like to support the show and help fund research, production, and editing, you can do so with a small monthly contribution on Patreon. Patreon supporters get early access to ad-free episodes and exclusive bonus content. You can learn more at patreon.com/forensictales. Thank you so much to this week's newest supporters, Doug G. and Sammy A. And if you enjoy the show, leaving a positive rating or review really helps others discover it. For a full list of sources used in this episode, visit forensictales.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings.
Tires matter. They're the only part of your vehicle that touches the road. Tread confidently with new tires from Tire Rack. Whether you're looking for expert recommendations or know exactly what you want, Tire Rack makes it easy. Fast, free shipping, free road hazard protection, and convenient installation options. Go to TireRack.com to see tire test results, tire ratings, and consumer reviews, and be sure to check out all the special offers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.
Every month you rent, you're paying someone else's mortgage, building their equity, following their rules. There's a better way. Home ownership means stable, predictable payments, and every one of them works for you, not your landlord. City Ventures is California's leading builder of smart, innovative new homes, and right now owning may be closer than you think. See the numbers for yourself at cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.